At 19, Darci Lynne finally reveals the truth about the day everything almost fell apart on. It wasn't just another big performance, it was a moment that shook her to the core. And then, Simon Cowell stepped in, not as the tough judge you know, but in a way that nobody expected. Tune in to find out how one day on changed everything for Darci Lynne, forever. Simon Cowell played a pivotal role in Darci Lynne's journey. A sweet young girl wins the hearts of America with her Ventriloquist act, gets the golden buzzer, and voila, instant fame. But let's be real, it wasn't all sunshine, confetti, and puppet magic. Behind that polished performance was a whirlwind of messiness that nobody really saw coming. She had to work her socks off to get here. There was one moment that almost made her quit, something so explosive, it could change everything you thought you knew. Simon Cowell himself got involved in the story, and for those of you thinking he's the big bad wolf who's only into money and hits, well, you're not entirely wrong. But there's more to it. After she won, Simon's psycho music swooped her up like a kid grabbing the last cookie. One Direction, Little Mix, and now her? Simon had his next act ready, and she was his ticket to adding a bit more wholesome to his lineup. Let's face it, ventriloquism was a unique twist for the label. It worked for a while, she got a ton of opportunities, from working with top producers to appearing on shows. But let's not act like it was some dream gig where everything was perfect. Behind the scenes, things were hectic. All the polished appearances, perfect pitches, and puppet tricks. It took a lot of behind-the-curtain chaos, a lot of people telling her how to stand, what to say, and even how to smile at the right moment. Let's talk about her big golden buzzer moment. It was iconic, no doubt. But that golden buzzer didn't come without some meticulously planned puppetry, every beat and note rehearsed a million times over until even she probably wanted to strangle her own puppet, metaphorically speaking, of course. While everyone else saw a girl effortlessly singing her heart out while her puppet sidekick did its thing, she was running through mental gymnastics just to make sure every move was executed flawlessly. All that just for a couple of seconds of glitter raining down on her head. She had to evolve, reinvent herself, and make sure she wasn't just another winner relegated to one of those "Where Are They Now?" YouTube compilations. She added more characters, brought new routines, and basically tried anything that would keep people interested for more than 10 seconds, because that's about the attention span of audiences these days. Darci stayed surprisingly down to earth. It's easy to get caught up in that celebrity life, but somehow, she managed to still thank her parents, smile for the cameras, and not get completely fed up with all the puppets she had to drag around. Honestly, props to her. Most of us would have just set fire to them by now, but she kept her cool and even grew to love them more. Could she break out of ventriloquism if she wanted to? At some point, you have to wonder if she even got sick of the puppets. Wouldn't it be easier to just sing without having to pretend a stuffed animal was hitting the high notes? But ventriloquism was her thing. It was her hook, the unique twist that set her apart. And in an industry built on gimmicks and what's trending now, she knew better than to ditch her golden ticket just yet. Simon, surprisingly enough, even showed his softer side, at least once. He connected with a fan who was on their way out, in other words, they were very, very sick. Simon's all tough as nails when he's on TV, but apparently, the guy has a heart somewhere under all that black wardrobe and sharp comments. He showed up to meet the fan, not for the cameras, but because he actually cared. With him was Richard Goodall, someone most people haven't even heard of, but who's done some good work spreading positivity with his music. Together, Simon and Richard made that fan's day, turning what could have been a sad farewell into something almost uplifting. Turns out even the king of snark can do something nice every now and then. Who knew? Her story isn't just about a girl and her puppet. It's about having a mentor who'll drag you through the muck when you're ready to quit, having enough humility to take orders when everyone is treating you like a superstar, and realizing that every smile on stage is backed by a ton of sweat and sacrifice backstage. She had to navigate a tricky world where you're only as good as your last performance, and where even a puppet has to be perfect. Her journey is a mix of skill, perseverance, and a bit of luck, but mainly, it's a reminder that success isn't always as glamorous as it looks from the outside. It's about constantly evolving, holding on to what makes you unique. and grinding away, even when the applause has faded. And who knows? Maybe one day she will decide to ditch the puppets altogether and just be herself, no strings attached. Behind the spotlight, there was a reality of constant hard work and emotional roller coasters. Not many people saw the exhaustion that came from endless rehearsals or the times when she just wanted to be a normal teenager without the pressures of keeping a career afloat. Fame, while often celebrated, came with its own burdens. Public perception meant she had to constantly be the smiling, upbeat girl everyone remembered from the show, even when she was drained and overworked. The entertainment industry is a relentless machine, and once you're in, it's hard to take a break. She wasn't immune to the unrealistic expectations that the public and her own management had for her. She had to churn out new content, attend events, make appearances, and maintain a high level of performance, all while still being a teenager dealing with typical growing pains. It's almost surreal to think of a young girl juggling ventriloquist acts in front of thousands while her peers were just worrying about their high school homework or weekend plans. After Darci had to keep up her image, and Gary Owen was there to make sure everything stayed perfect. There was branding, marketing, and the whole package that came with being a psycho music artist. Photo shoots, interviews, getting her social media presence just right, it was all part of the job. The kind of public scrutiny that most adults would struggle with was part of her daily life. Everything she did was carefully curated to maintain her image, and Gary Owen was always there, watching over her shoulder, making sure she didn't slip. He wasn't just a mentor in ventriloquism, he was her handler in many ways, making sure she was marketable, polished, and perfect. But amidst all the stress, she found ways to keep her sanity intact. Her family played a huge role in keeping her grounded. Unlike many young stars who end up isolated, she kept her close family ties. Her mom was always by her side, not just as a manager but as a supportive presence. Whenever things got too overwhelming, she found solace in her family, who always reminded her of who she was outside of the showbiz whirlwind. They gave her the strength to keep going, even when the grind seemed endless. Her puppets, while sometimes a burden, were also a comfort. Each character was a part of her, a little piece of her creativity that she could control in a world where not much else seemed to be within her grasp. The humor she injected into her puppet shows was also a way for her to cope. It allowed her to channel her emotions, the good, the bad, and the frustrating, into something productive. Those puppets became her allies in a world that often demanded too much from her. Her tours across the country weren't without their own set of challenges. Performing night after night, constantly traveling, living out of suitcases, it was exhausting. The glamour of being on stage was often overshadowed by the mundane and tiring aspects of being on the road. Hours spent rehearsing, the nerves before each show, the pressure to be perfect, it was all part of the package. But the applause, the laughter, and the smiles from her audience were what kept her going. For those moments on stage, it was all worth it. And then there was Gary. He was tough on her, no doubt about it. His standards were high, and he didn't tolerate mediocrity. He would push her until she got it right, sometimes even when she was on the brink of exhaustion. But she knew he wanted the best for her. He had been there from the beginning, believing in her potential even when she doubted herself. It was Gary's constant belief that kept her from giving up. He wasn't just her mentor, he was her rock, the person who always made sure she was giving her best. There were times, though, when she wondered if it was all worth it. Was the fame, the applause, the recognition enough to make up for the sacrifices she had to make? She missed out on so much of her teenage years, the sleepovers, the carefree weekends, the friendships that weren't built around her career. She had friends, but there was always a distance. They couldn't fully understand what her life was like, and she couldn't always join in on their normal activities. It was lonely at times, and she often felt like she was missing out on just being a regular teenager. But when she stepped on stage and saw the joy her performances brought to people, it all seemed worth it. Seeing the smiles on the faces of her audience, hearing the laughter as her puppets cracked jokes, feeling the energy of a crowd that was truly entertained, that was her reward. It was what kept her going through all the challenges. Those moments reminded her why she was doing this. It wasn't just for the fame or the money, it was for the connection she made with people, the joy she could bring into their lives. It's not just about being talented, it's about being willing to put in the work, to face the challenges head-on, and to keep going even when things get tough. It's about having the right people by your side, those who will push you when you need it and hold you up when you feel like falling. Her journey has been far from easy, and there were plenty of moments when she could have walked away. But she didn't. She stayed, she fought, and she continued to grow. Her evolution as an entertainer is still ongoing. She's still young, with a whole career ahead of her, and there's no telling where she'll end up. Whether she continues with ventriloquism or decides to branch out into something entirely new, one thing is certain: she will continue to captivate audiences with her talent, her dedication, and her ability to bring a little bit of magic into people's lives. And maybe, just maybe, one day she'll put down the puppets and step into the spotlight as just herself, no strings attached. Darci was only 12 when she won 12. Just a kid, really. The kind of kid most of us were when we were still figuring out if we liked chocolate milk better than regular or stressing over spelling tests. But not her. She was out there winning over millions, puppeteering her way to stardom. And it all happened at an age when most of us were trying to understand how not to be awkward at school dances. Now, at 19, she's finally spilling some of the beans about what that crazy, bizarre, and let's be honest, probably kinda exhausting ride was really like. Winning a huge show at 12 is basically like being handed a "congratulations. Now please keep doing amazing things or everyone's going to be disappointed in you" award. Talk about heavy stuff. Everyone expected her to just keep upping her game. Make new puppets, do more jokes, sing better songs, just casually keep being superhuman, while also being a kid. Every time she hit that stage, it was like she had to prove she still deserved to be there, that she hadn't lost whatever magic got her the trophy in the first place. It's a lot to take on, and a lot of grown-ups couldn't handle it, but there she was, smiling away for all of us. Fame wasn't easy. Darci had to juggle being a public figure and a regular kid, and it took a toll on her. Being famous means you don't get to do normal stuff. While most kids were busy worrying about who they'd sit with at lunch or what they'd wear to the school dance, she was probably jetting off to some big TV interview or rehearsal. No hanging out at the mall with friends or going to the school carnival. Instead, it's all about rehearsals, photo shoots, and making sure your puppet doesn't fall apart mid-show. Fame puts you in a bubble where you're kind of stuck between two worlds, the kid you're supposed to be and the celebrity everyone else thinks you are. And the biggest problem with that bubble? It's lonely. Because the people around you either don't get what you're going through, or they're just not there at all, busy with their normal lives. Growing up famous means having to learn to cope with all sorts of pressures that regular kids don't even have to think about. Imagine being 13 and wondering if you're already past your prime, or if your best days are behind you. Imagine trying to balance being a normal teenager with being a brand that people recognize. It's a recipe for burnout. For someone like her, staying sane probably meant taking a step back once in a while, focusing on things that weren't about winning awards or making headlines. It's a juggling act, that's for sure, trying to keep up with your mental health while also keeping up with public expectations. The shiny moments are what everyone remembers, the standing ovations, the big checks, the flashing lights, but what about all the parts that nobody sees? The anxiety, the self-doubt, the loneliness? Fame isn't some magic cure-all that makes life easy. In fact, it often makes everything harder. But despite all that, she's still here, figuring it out. And that's probably the most impressive thing about her, not the puppets, not the trophies, but the fact that she's managed to hold onto herself through it all. The real trick isn't making a puppet talk, it's making sure your own voice doesn't get lost in the process. That probably meant relying heavily on her family, because in a world where everyone sees you as an opportunity or an idol, the people who knew her before she was famous were the only ones who truly knew who she was. Her parents weren't just parents, they became managers, emotional anchors, and the people who kept her grounded when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Support systems, and the closest friends she had, that's a lot for any family to deal with. As much as they may have wanted her to succeed, they probably also wanted her to just be a kid sometimes. Striking that balance is incredibly difficult. Fame turns every family moment into a potential opportunity for branding. A family vacation? Suddenly, it's content for Instagram. A quiet dinner at home? It's interrupted by the need to rehearse for the next event. Fame isn't just about the individual, it pulls everyone around them into its orbit. Darci started to see fame for what it really was, not just an opportunity but also a burden. At 12, she might have seen as a chance to show off her skills and make people happy. By 19, she probably realized it was a lot more complicated than that. The industry has a way of chewing people up and spitting them out. It's all about what's new and exciting, and as soon as you stop being that, it moves on without you. Staying relevant is a full-time job. It means constantly reinventing yourself, constantly finding ways to stay in the public eye, and constantly battling the fear that maybe, just maybe, your moment has passed. That's a terrifying thought for anyone, let alone someone who's barely out of high school. She has managed to hold on to some sense of herself. She's had to navigate a world that's often unforgiving, where one mistake can be the thing everyone remembers about you. The fact that she's still performing, still finding joy in her craft, speaks volumes about her resilience. Many young stars fall apart under the weight of all these pressures. They turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms, fade into obscurity, or quit entirely. She, on the other hand, has chosen to keep going, to keep figuring it out. And that says a lot more about her than any trophy ever could. The challenge now is how to evolve without losing what made her special in the first place. It's a delicate balance, staying true to her roots while also proving that she's more than her past accomplishments. Fame has a way of making people think they know everything about you, but her real journey is just beginning. Whether she ends up taking her talents in a completely new direction or finding ways to innovate within her craft, what matters most is that she's doing it on her terms. She's spent years living up to everyone else's expectations, and now it's time for her to figure out what she wants. Was Simon Cowell a force for good in Darci's journey, or just another shrewd opportunist? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe.